Welcome to another episode of Behind the Dreamers. I'm Jennifer Loading, and we are talking to the achievers, the creators, the magic makers, and the dreamers. These are our friends. These are your friends, and they are living the extraordinary. Well, I'm so excited about my guest today. She's had an incredible journey in the world of sports and business, realizing the power of sports talk in her career. She teamed up with her brother to create last night's game, leveling the playing field for her friends by empowering them to dive into the sports conversation. Her career has been nothing short of remarkable, with experiences in male-dominated industries, including a role in a Major League Baseball team, with a Major League Baseball team. As a third-generation entrepreneur, she once circled the globe in an astonishing 58 hours and 37 minutes. Kind of cool. And she's no stranger to the international scene. She's a true master of small talk, bridging connections, and bringing people together. So I'm so excited to welcome her on. You're going to want to make sure you head over to Starter Girl so you can hear what she has to say over there. But before we get her on here, I do need to do a quick shout out to our sponsors. So today's episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Photography. If you are a creator needing post-production, consultation, or promotion, Walt is your guy. Whether short films, YouTube films, photography work, or a new headshot, he can help you find a solution to match your needs. To learn more about Walt and his work, you're going to want to head over to photosbywalt.com. All right, so my guest today, Amy Siegfried, she is an entrepreneur. She's a TEDx speaker. She's a podcast host. She's also an adjunct professor. She's an investor, and she is a sports enthusiast. She wears many hats. I'm so excited to have her on today. So welcome to the show, Amy. We're so glad to have you here today.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm really excited to be here with you.
It's going to be awesome. We also have so much to say on the intro of that Behind the Dreamers. It's like a mouthful. Sometimes my brain gets working too fast and the mouth doesn't want to keep up. But anyways, we're so glad to have you here today. Yep, you get it. So I want to open this up real quick. I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing. And so let's start there. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing so our audience knows where you're coming from.
So my primary day job, besides taking care of my 5-year-old and making sure my house is still standing, is I'm the co-founder of a company called Last Night's Game. And we cover sports for those who don't know a lot about sports, but need to talk about them in social situations. And we're not here to turn you into an ESPN sideline reporter. We just want you to have that tool in your tool belt of success, especially when it comes to networking, communicating in the office, just really making those connections, whether you're in sales or whatever role you might be. It's just become this huge, I realized what an advantage I had knowing as much as I do about sports is how that really helped me in my career. And so we do that through a tri-weekly podcast as well as an email newsletter that goes out once a week. And we believe in short and sweet and fun. Like, no one learns if things are boring. That's why your podcast is fun, because it's not boring, right? People are engaged. And so we make it fun. We love talking about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, and we love talking about all the fun ways that pop culture and sports collide so that we can go ahead and enjoy in the conversation about sports, but not have to talk about statistics and use all the acronyms and all of those things. So that is hat number one. Hat number two, I am the vice chair and incoming board chair for Irish Angels, which is one of the largest angel investing groups in the country. We're based in Chicago. So I spent a lot of time doing that, looking at different businesses out there who are seeking fundraising. And so that's been a lot of fun. I also chair the DEI committee. So we really strive to bring in underrepresented communities businesses that are led by underrepresented communities. And it's just really cool. I think one of the best things about that is I call it Shark Tank for people from Notre Dame. And it's just so neat to see what people create. I know that's why we all watch Shark Tank, because we love to see what people create and where they came up with these ideas. And we get to do that in real life. And that's really a lot of fun. And then I'm an adjunct professor as well. So why not?
Yeah, you got a lot going on. No, and I love it, and I think the thing, I want to back up to what you said about the sports thing, because funny enough, so when I don't know, like in the first year, I think I did Starter Girls, I had a sports agent come on my show, and he was working, I think, with some of the Cowboys players, because I'm here in Dallas. So he's working with some of the Cowboys players, and really young guy, smart. And so I brought another, a visiting co-host on, because I knew that sports talk was going to come up, and I don't know anything about sports. And so I brought this co-host on. It was so funny because guess what happened? My show, we got into a whole football conversation in the middle of the show, and all I could do was kind of go,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I am absolutely impressed that you can do this. And I do think you're so right, because when you're out networking, like if you have nothing to say, you could start a conversation with that a lot of times, right? Wait, what do you think about this team or whatever? If you're, if they're local to your town or whatever, you could start a conversation when you know something about sports.
Absolutely. And it's not, it tends to not be controversial, right? There's so many things I feel like we can't talk about anymore. And not that you ever
Yeah.
started a conversation about religion or politics, but it's
Right.
just this great entry point to say, are you a baseball fan? The World Series is coming up. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. And what I really love about sports, and I tell people this all the time, it's this perfect conversation starter, but it's also a perfect way to dive into anything else, right? Travel ties perfectly into sports. Food ties into sports. There's all these different topics. Fashion, it all fits into the world of sports. And so I am a perfect example of this. I went on a meeting in New York. Oh gosh, it was right when we started last night's game. So probably 6 or 7 years ago. And the gentleman was a huge Red Sox fan and a Yankees fan, which doesn't really work together, but he was from Boston, lives in New York now. And decided he was going to go on and on at this happy hour about the 1972 Red Sox, which I knew absolutely nothing about. So you can imagine as my panic set in just a little bit.
Right.
And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, you're from Boston. I've been to Fenway. I went there for work one year. It's really cool. I sat on the Green Monster. But tell me about what it was like to grow up in Boston. Where do you like to go eat? What do you like to do? Did you road trip to New York a lot? Like, how'd you end up here?" So it's this great way to get this little nugget about this person and then be able to spin that into something you are truly curious about. And I mean, I know, Jennifer, you do that every day. You're on these podcasts. You're curious about people and what they're doing. Be curious about that person. And I mean, if someone wants to talk about stamp collecting, like, are there any famous, I don't know, sports people on stamps? What's the coolest stamp you've ever collected? Like, there's all these ways to dive in and out of conversation, and knowing that sports is this safe way to start. And if you know what's happening in the world, it's a great way to do so. And so I always look at that. There's stuff that's evergreen content. There's great ways to talk about things that are happening. But if you just know, I think Super Bowl is a great example, right? We all get excited about the Super Bowl, but all for different reasons. I personally
Right.
love the commercials. And so, everyone has that. So being able to have that little bit of conversation to know that the Super Bowl is coming up and what's your favorite Super Bowl commercial you've ever seen. It's a sporty conversation and it sounds like you know what's going on, but in all fairness, you don't have to talk anything about sports. You can talk about commercials and products at that point.
Yeah. I like that you segued at the beginning when you merged into tell me about where you're from, that kind of thing. I think that's great. I think I feel like conversation really is about asking questions. It's about being
Mm-hmm.
curious and asking other people questions. And I learned something. I don't know where I heard this, that to work on being interested versus being interesting, right? And so when you focus on the other
Mm-hmm.
person, you ask questions, it really just opens the door to conversation. And then you can get into that dialogue, because naturally, if there are conversations, they're going to reciprocate and want to know, well, hey, tell me about this. And I do think, yeah, you're right, because then you can stay away from these topics that we don't want to get into, like what sports, I mean, not sports, excuse me, religion, politics. We don't want to be into that
Right.
stuff. And so it's
Yeah.
an easy way to get into. Oh, so you're from there. So tell me, what's it like living there? Like, what kind of food do you guys have? These are the questions I ask.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, so what led you into stamp collecting? Like, what brought you to
Mm-hmm.
that? you,
And
you
they
know?
all come out of these, right? You have to open the doors somehow. And I find that these
Right.
icebreakers, sports especially, is such a great way to do that, especially with a male colleague. I mean, I really found that I was able to, not that I ever tell anyone they ever have to assimilate to fit into a male culture, but in a workspace, but it does help to have that sort of just common language, if you will. And I say that like it's leveling the playing field. It really does help. And I've realized how much that helped me. And it's kind of funny. I never realized it, right? I was always this is my friend Amy. She's the cool one. And I'm like, I don't know, but that's what they would always tell all their boyfriends, because it was one of those that we had that in common. We typically had that in common. And I do find that about 35 to 40% of our listeners, our readers, are men, because they don't have either the interest or they don't have the time to keep up with what's happening at the high level of what's happening in the world of sports. And so I really enjoy that. We have one gentleman who reads every time. Before he makes sure to read like the 2 or 3 newsletters ahead, or listen to the episode ahead of going to the barber shop. because he said that's what everyone talks about at the barbershop. And he just has that little nugget that he can be able to drop in there. So he knows just enough to be able to talk about the world of sports. And then you don't have to carry on to about the 1972 Red Sox. I have no idea if they won a World Series. I don't know. I don't know anything about them. But therefore, I came out of that looking like roses because I somehow engaged in this conversation that started that way and finished that way. But in the middle, it was something that I drove.
Yeah. This is good. I want to backpedal just a little bit to learn
Go
a
for
little
it.
bit about how you came to all of this, because you obviously you worked with the Major League Baseball team at one time, and you've been kind of in a male dominated area of work. And so was that kind of, did you seek those opportunities out, or did you just sort of, it kind of unfolded this way for you?
Well, it's really funny that the way I started, I started working with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I was a junior in college at Arizona State. And like every junior in college, like, what do I want to be when I grow up? I wanted to be Katie Couric, but I realized there was one Katie Couric in the world, and so that probably wasn't going to be me. That's the really motivating go get him there
Right.
attitude that I had. So I changed to be a PR major, public relations instead of broadcasting. And I was at a meeting, PRSSA, which is the Public Relations Student Society of America. There's a professional version of that. And the PR guy from the Diamondbacks, Mike Swanson, came in with my well, soon to be boss, Karen Conway, and she came in and talked about what she did. And she did community relations for the team, and that meant running school programs for the players, doing different outreach programs, working with Make a Wish, working basically in the community as a representative of the team. I was like, it was sort of that like light bulb went off. I had no idea this was a job. And so she mentioned that they were hiring an intern. And I was like, okay, I'm going to put my name in it. I don't know. I went and talked to her and don't know where that gumption came from, but got up there, talked to her and said, I want to apply for your internship. So I did. It took a long time to go through the interview process, multiple interviews, and ended up getting the job. And I, of course, had to cut my spring break short because, that's what happens, and cut my spring break short and went to work for the team. And I worked my butt off for $5.25 an hour, and I loved every bit of it. I did whatever anybody would ask. You want me to push a dolly full of baseballs and heels? I'm in. What do you want me to do? And so I just kept working and working. And when the internship was over at the end of the season, they offered me a full-time job for when I graduated school. So I stayed on board and just worked my way up through the department. And when I left, I ran the foundation and the department itself. And I really loved what opportunities that provided me in my career to meet people. It opened a lot of doors. When you leave a really cool job like that, though, you do realize who your friends are, because there were always those people who would call just when some good team was coming into town or just when something big was happening. But so
Yeah.
that's a very humbling moment to realize that there are people who really just liked you for what you did, not who you are. And so that was really the whole genesis of my career. And then I launched into opening up markets for doing some work in Chicago. I started my own event planning business. My husband and I lived in Singapore, so I did marketing and advertising there. And we came back from Singapore to the US and started Last Night's Game because it was between Christmas and New Year's and no one was hiring. So we figured, why not give it a try? So
It's
there we
awesome.
have
It's
it.
awesome. It's a great story. Yeah, and I no, and I think that's the best part of, I think people when they look at entrepreneurs, they oftentimes sort of get this idea that everything sort of just happened. Like it just you
Mhm.
arrive, you're there, right? They don't really know all the things, the journey that you had to go through. And I always say there's nothing linear about what we do. Everything overlaps, right? And if you were to look at where you first started in this area to where you are now, you might not see the connection. But if you look at all the stepping stones in between, then you'll see where everything's sort of connected to the next piece. And so I think that's what's so remarkable about these stories is the journey that people go through to get from where they started and where they ended up. And so one of the things I do want to ask you, because again, you started this business. I mean, you've done several things and you've obviously been in this, in the field for a little bit moving in here, but I'd love to know what was maybe one of the biggest struggles that you guys had to do coming up with this Last Night's Game, like when this all started, like maybe some hurdles that you had to overcome to get this up and running.
I would say that in the beginning, some of the biggest things was really defining who we had a big discussion about this, who our market's going to be. And as a marketing person, I know that the best way we can be successful is to pick our market and own it, right? Pick who we're going to be who we're going to be talking to and own that market. And that market for us is executive women ages 35 to 49. And that tends to be our sweet spot. That tends to be those who realize the value of what we're doing. We decided to focus on women, and that's changed our trajectory. And that I think was a tension point, because we wanted to be all things for all people, and you can't. And I use the analogy of ladies' night, right? Just because it's ladies' night doesn't mean guys aren't going to show up, and doesn't mean that even the ladies who showed up knew it was ladies' night. It's just one of those. Everyone will evolve, and if people resonate with your content, they'll show up regardless. But if you have $100 to spend on marketing and advertising, you want to spend it on those people who fit your mold and you're most likely to be successful with. And so that, I would say, that would be a big tension point. That was challenging. I mean, just the purely setting up everything that you're doing is challenging. Coming from the corporate world where you had a legal department, you had an accounting department, you had a marketing department. Now you have my brain, and my brother works with me part-time. So you have 1.5 brains making all of this up, really, when it comes down to it. And you sort of figure it out. And what I loved about that, and what I love about what we do, is we're at the space where if we have an idea, we just do it. We're not meta. We're not trying to turn this giant cruise ship, right? We can be this nimble, great group that if something sounds interesting, if someone comes up and says, hey, I want you to do, I don't know, baseball trivias on Tuesdays. Okay, why not? That sounds interesting. I think we have the capacity to do it. Let's do it. And so I do really love that perspective of it. But being a small team definitely has its challenges, especially when it comes to doing all the content. We pump out a lot of content, and doing things like social media on top of that, but then also having time to goal set and really sit and work on big long-term projects and different things like that. There's only so much time in the day and only so much brain power that you have. And so for me, I ended up hiring a coach, which was really important for me because it allowed me to soundboard off of someone, because I was truly sort of running into a brick wall with the capacity of what I knew and what I could do. And so it's really been fascinating to have that just additional perspective and an outside perspective, which was really important for me. So that to me helped. But I would go back to one other big challenge we have is Scott and I were raised in the same household. So we have a lot of the same values. We think the same way. Yes, we live in 2 different places, and yes, we're a boy and a girl, and we're different ages, and we have sort of different lifestyles, but we have a lot of the same values. So some of our challenges are what we think is interesting or what we feel is valuable, which is what's a moral or something that we do, a high road we take. That's for us, and that's what we do. But it's really interesting because we don't necessarily represent everyone, right? And so we do think very much the same on a lot of things. And so that has been nice to have some outside perspective. And we've had ambassadors that we've relied on for outside perspective, because we don't know it all. And us realizing that we don't know it all was one of the biggest things we've come up with.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I think that gets back to like kind of knowing your market, right? Like what you said in the very beginning, because I think for a lot of us, that is the biggest struggle, is trying to figure out who is our target audience. And again, yeah, we think, and I find this sometimes with new entrepreneurs that they want to cover like a large market, right? They think, well, if I go broader, get wider out, then I can have more areas to tap into. And no, you're really better off finding out who your market is and really targeting those people. Because the way I see this, it's kind of like selling, right? Like the way I would give this an example is just talk about programs, courses, right? Like if you have a $199 course versus a $9,900 course, right? Like these are going to be entirely different kind of people. And if you're trying to sell a $10,000 course to people who are wanting to pay $199 for a course, you're going to feel defeated. You're going to feel like you're wasting your time, your energy. You're not even going to probably realize it. You shouldn't be marketing to them. You're just going to feel like you're not going to make this, right? And so I think you're right. You hit the nail on the head when you said finding your market, because I think that's hard for a lot of people to figure out. And I really think once you get that, then yes, it makes it easier. But also, to your point, it allows you then to also understand what it is they want and they need, too, so that you can sort of tailor your stuff to fit them as well, and not be so blinded that this is what works for me. It's like social media, right? Like I laugh at this all the time because I'll make a post about something and I love this post, right? And I put it out and I'm like, nobody likes it. And then I'll go do another one that I'm like, I spent no time on, Like, it's just cheesy. It's awful. And then everybody likes it. And I'm like, Amy, I'm like, what the hell? What's up with
What
that?
did
They
I
like that
miss?
cheesy
Yeah.
thing. Like, I didn't put any brain power even into that one. That was like a no-brainer. And I'm like, what? No.
Yep, that's it. But that's 100% true. And I think that's why, I mean, if you look at, there's a reason that TikTok and Instagram, that you're getting fed the content that you like, right? There's a reason they're doing that. They want to keep you engaged. And if you think about your product or your business as the same way, of feeding the stuff that you're providing to the people who want to watch it. Why waste why waste your abilities and your time on the people who don't want to watch it? They're here on the fringe. Sure, could you be selling, I don't know, a 401k to, like, but yeah, sure, you're going to be hitting these people, but the people who are 5 years old don't want it. And the people who are 65 and above don't need it. So it's like, you, sure, maybe the people who are 65 and above will buy or pitch in or do something for their people who are 30, their grandkids who are 30. Sure, that makes sense. But really, overall, your market is here. Don't sell to the fringe, because they may, sure, if they fall on, if they want to come in, they'll come in. But ultimately, stay in your lane. Just keep getting those cooking videos, and for me, like hair videos on TikTok, because I don't know how to do my own hair, hence the headband. And so keep feeding me those videos, TikTok. I mean, that's what I'm watching.
My TikTok is littered with animals, Amy. Cats, cats, and
No
cats.
pun intended.
It's so funny because this is what I do. I don't get on there very often, but when I'm bored, I might like take a few minutes, and I'm like, all that comes up are animals, and so all I do is send TikTok videos to my kids, animals to my kids. That's all I do, and that's where they think they must know, because they just keep sending me more, so they know,
They do. They
right?
know everything about us. They're now we're going to be stocked with animal and 401k videos. Yeah.
Exactly. You're right. I'm going to go in there and be like, dang it, Amy, I'm getting 401k videos in my feed today, and you're getting
And ads
cats
for
in
ladies.
yours. So fun, so fun. All right, so what if in this journey, because like I said, you're wearing many hats, you're doing incredible things, and I love it. You're an entrepreneur doing it all. I would love to know what you've learned about yourself in this whole journey.
I've learned that I can't do it all. And I learned that I need to give myself some slack. So I would tell you, I learned that I went back to get my MBA. My son was 1.5, and it happened to be January of 2021, which we all know what happened there. And so that was a huge lift, trying to go to school with a child at home, and then also to work with my husband at home, sitting across the room from me. And I had to get noise canceling headphones because we were too loud. I mean, his phone calls are too loud. And so you're trying to navigate all this. And what I learned is, I came off of that MBA 18 months, and I was going for 18, 20 hours a day. Like, it was just, that was my whole day and my whole life. And so I rolled off to that. And it took me about 6 months to get back to where I was taking care of myself, that I was going to bed at a reasonable amount of time. And I was so much better when I slept. I was so much better when I worked out. I was so much better when I ate better. All these things, that I was actually a better performer by working less. And I don't mean that I'm, trying to tell you to work a 3-hour workday or something like that, but by giving myself that time to stop and decompress and get some sleep, it's made me such a better human and such a better worker, a better family member, a better coworker. And so for me, I realize that I can do more by doing less, if that makes sense. And that I really need to stop and invest in me. And one of the things I'm not good at is goal setting. I'm not good at stopping and doing research. Like, I know people who will sit and read all kinds of workbooks and different things. I don't do a good job at that. I'm just kind of the one who wants to action everything. And so I've realized that about myself, and I've really tried to define my calendar to give myself Friday afternoons to learn something new. Right now, I'm attempting to learn golf, which, when you're an adult trying to learn a new sport, it teaches you patience, because the first lesson I was like, this is dumb. I mean, I can hit the ball, but now I've learned all the rules. I have to putt. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. This is a big learning curve. And so, but I think that's so important for us to evolve and learn, but also give ourselves the time to evolve and learn, versus just going, going, going. Give yourself time to take a break, let your brain rest, go do something fun that's not work related. Go read a crap novel that has nothing to do with business, just so your brain can just be somewhere else for a little while, because those ideas start churning when you sleep. Your ideas start churning when you take a break and go see something different, go do something different. And I feel come back feeling so much more refreshed.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I would say learning golf, yes, you would have to have patience for that. I know I would, because it's kind of slow anyways, right? And
Yep.
you mentioned a
Mm-hmm.
few minutes ago, you're kind of an action doer, and I tend to be that way
Yep.
too. Like, I'm a person that like skims things and I just go to work. Like, I learn by
Mm-hmm.
doing. I can't sit and read things over and
Yep.
over and like keep thinking. I just like have to get in, dive in head first, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to learn, and I'm probably going to mess it up a few times, but then I'm going to figure it out along the way. Right. And so I would say, if
Right.
you're ever do golf, I'd probably be the same way you are. I'd really have to reel that patience in to
I've
do
had
it.
the talk with myself. Yep. Be patient.
Yeah, I think it's good though that you're talking about really carving that time out though for yourself, because I do think that's huge, and I think a lot of people take that for
It's
granted.
hard.
Yeah, it is. And I always go back to Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of the Highly Effective, where he talks about, I don't know if you've read, that's one of my favorite books. He talks about the 4 quadrants and how we spend all of our time in the task oriented things that we have to get done, helping other people and wasting energy. But we spend very little time in the areas that involve our personal development and our self care.
Mm-hmm.
And that really is the most important thing, because when you take care of that, you are more efficient, right? Like you said, you get to work a little less. It's not that we're promoting that you only have 3 hour days, but when you show up differently, you are more effective at the work that you do in the time that you do it. So rather than
Absolutely.
spending 8 hours, right? 8 hours of a day with maybe 3 hours of that being wasted because you're piddling around, right? You come in, you
Mm-hmm.
work 4 hours and you're on it and you get it done.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of that scenario for anyone who's ever worked for a boss who says you have to be at your desk from 8 to 5. Do you know how much you get done from 8 to 5? Probably 2 or 3 hours work of work. But then you're screwing around because you're stuck there and you have nothing better to do. But if your boss said, and I had one boss who used to do this like right around Christmas time, she'd say, if you come in and get all your stuff done, you can go home. I would walk in that office at 8 a.m. with a 25 item to-do list. And I'd be out the door by noon. And if that was like,
Yeah.
you have to stay here 8 to 5, it would take me 6 days to do that 25 item list, because it would be like, I'm not really motivated. I don't need to get this done. But it's like, if I can get through and get things done. And I go back to the sort of that evolution. And I read this, I was in a store about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was like a t-shirt shop somewhere. And it had a sign on the wall and it said, evolve or die. And I just thought to me, like, that was it's a little morbid, but it's true, right? As we continue to, whether that's your business or whether that's you, continue to evolve, continue to learn. And I think about my father-in-law, who I love so much. I love watching his brain. He asks so many questions. He'll be 75 in December, and he's a businessman by trade, but he's always evolving. He's always asking questions. He's always learning. He's always coming to me and saying, like, what does this mean? Well, I want to know what this is. Show me what TikTok is. He wants to know what these things are. He may not get on TikTok and may not get on Twitter, but he wants to understand it. He wants to know what it is so he can have that conversation. And I love that about him. And I think that is such a cool way to go about life, is just continuing to learn. Don't just shut up and say, I'm not going to try to figure out how this new iPhone works. I don't need it. I don't want it. I'm done. I'm just going to call it a day. I'm going to get out my jitterbug phone. Like, evolve and learn. And
Yeah.
maybe you don't have to get it, but understand why people want it. What are they looking at? What are they doing? Understand what, those coming out of college. I mean, I look at it from evolution too. Like, well, younger generations have not been drinking as much as the generations before them. And I've had all these, people who are my age make comments, and I'm like, well, that's their choice. They want to go out and live a cleaner, live a fuller life, and that maybe is a little less cloudy, as spend their money elsewhere. And so it's like, why are they doing that? Ask the questions, learn, versus just making these assumptions. And so I just think that's so important for all of us as we continue, no matter what age we are, to continue to evolve, learn up, learn down when it comes from generational learning, but also ask. I know we've talked a lot about this previously, but like, be curious, ask questions, continue to evolve yourself and invest in yourself, whether that's an MBA or whether that's reading a new book or learning a new skill.
So good. Good stuff, Amy. Thank you. I love it.
Thank
You're
you.
so right. All right. So this has been great. If our audience wants to get in touch with you, they may want to come check out the last night's game, see what that's all about. Maybe they want to follow you. Who knows? Reach out to you. Where do we want to send them?
So we're at lastnightsgame.com, and we're on just about every social media platform you can think of at Last Night's Game. And I am the one who does all the Instagram. You will see me on there. So if you ever need anything, DM me. I'd be happy to chat with you.
Awesome. This has been so much fun. I think you and I could talk
Thank
for a
you.
long time. You're a
I
great
think so too.
person to have on the other end. It's always fun when I have somebody on the other side. I feel like I know you. We've only talked a few times, but I feel like I know you well. We feel like just keep going on this conversation. But I know how this
Absolutely.
is. We all got lives to live and things to tend to, and so do our listeners. And so with that, I do want to say, if you enjoy our show, to our listeners, of course, check us out over on Apple. Give us a review over there. You can hit that subscribe button on the YouTube. And I'm going to leave you with a final parting thought. In order to live the extraordinary, you must start, and every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another, and we will see you next time.